As a bit of an overview, this project, we set out to understand the food production ecosystem in Coffs Harbour, what it is doing today, and also we wanted to understand what it could potentially do in the future and what kinds of things then stand in the way of maybe getting to that end state. So that was our ambition. The two main objectives provided to us by the City Council was more capacity and more value-added products. So the future ecosystem should address those if possible. Before we go further, I'd like to just give a quick theoretical background to what we mean by this term ecosystem. We've seen it around the place. For me, the definition is it's a constellation of a variety of actors that come together and they work together to create a holistic value. In this case, we're creating value in food innovation. So that is the definition of ecosystem we're using. If we were to schematize that, it would look something like this on your screen. I drew this up. Basically what you see here are actors that have these dashed or perforated borders around them so that information and other resources can go in and out. They're connected to one another and they exchange resources. Resources can be money, financial resources, human resources, knowledge, technology, all kinds of things are exchanged for this holistic value to materialize. We also recognize that actors don't reside in isolation. They are surrounded by certain cultures and norms, which we captured under the term rules of engagement. And there's always, or there should be, ideally, some actor that takes leadership, has this grand vision of where the ecosystem should go and how it should get there, and how it can bring actors together into collaborative arrangements. So we identify that in that black star too. So that's our little schema, bit of a theory. Now I'm going to use that theory a little bit to sort of tell you about what we were thinking as we designed this research project. So on your screen now is the Coffs Harbour food ecosystem today. A very simplified schema. We have lots of blueberries. It's a big produce of the region. And our ambition is to transition that ecosystem to one where we're not only growing wonderful blueberries, but we're doing more value added than we are doing today. You know, whether that's blueberry soap, blueberry liquor, blueberry jam, maybe things that we don't exist at the moment, new innovations. What can the Coffs Harbour food ecosystem develop tomorrow? And of course, the question is, how do we transition from the left-hand side to the right-hand side of your screen? The way we designed the research was to have two big studies. The first one would be a qualitative one, and the second one would be a quantitative one. We were, I think, like many projects this last year, hampered by the pandemic, a lot of border closures, which limited our access to data, but we did our best. And so in study one, we had interviews with 11 members of the ecosystem, and we purposefully chose different actors. So they could be growers, they could be producers, maybe chambers of commerce, the city council, of course, airport, various actors to get their perceptions on the common focal issue, which is the ecosystem and how we could transition. By then bringing all this insight together, the synthesis told us about what stands in the way of making this transition. There's one construct that we used in this. We call it reverse saliency. It's an old military term, it stands for, or it identifies the components of this system that are backward producing, that limit the holistic system moving forward, so making that transition to a new state of more value-added products. In the military, in the First World War, it was it always denoted the part of a forward-moving military line that was protruding backwards and was a dangerous point. So we employ that in the analysis of technological systems or other kinds of systems in the managerial world. And we've employed that here in the analysis of our ecosystem in Coffs Harbour. So it's a nice little history there for you too. So what we did then is we went about and we had our wonderful conversations, and from that and the synthesis of that, we arrived at 3 strategic pathways that we think Coffs Harbour ecosystem could utilize to transition. And one of those is the precinct, another one is the agri-food network, and the third one is about the skills and training of the human resources at Coffs Harbour. I'll talk to you a little bit about those as we go through. In study 2, our ambition was to do a large quantitative study, but as I said earlier, that we were a little bit hampered by the pandemic, so we ended up with limited number of responses, 33 in all, and so we used these as more or less qualitative data rather than hard quantitative data to strengthen our findings from study 1. And we did find some correlations there as well, which I'll talk to you about soon in the coming slides. So briefly, as we go into study 1, as I mentioned at the very outset, this was such an exciting project to get to talk to people that are so passionate about what they do. And here are some real quotes that we captured in our conversations. You don't have to read all of them. If I just drew your attention to the blue highlighted, words and ideas, the variety of food, the seafood, the berries, the dairy farmers, the fertility of the lands, the indigenous culture that resides at Coffs Harbour. There's so much potential and so much passion that forms a foundation of the region there. So there's, I think, so much to build upon. So that was how we started. And then we went about and drew a schema of this ecosystem, all these actors that are in somehow collaboration with one another. And please forgive me for this, what looks like a messy schema, but to my eyes, it really summarizes big findings of connections between actors and how they collaborate. I'm not going to go through the details here. Basically, what you will find in this is that we have a supply chain, a traditional line of value adding, which, starting with growers, moving to producers, logistics companies, all the way to consumers. But we also have off this direct path of value creation actors that determine how value is created, whether it's the government, the council, chambers of commerce, even utilities. Those companies that form a premise for how things are done. They stand to influence what happens at Coffs Harbour. So we captured all of these. And for each of the actors, we then identified where trouble spots were located. And of course, these reverse salients. Where are these problems? And more than that, what is the impact of these reverse salients on the ecosystem at large? And we captured these for every actor. And I have many slides to show you, but I'm not going to do that in the interest of time. But for each one, a slide will look just like this. So the council, which, by the way, is doing such an incredible job over there, very forward visionary thinking people, and they've driven so much innovation and entrepreneurship already. But what we uncovered was if they had even more human resources, there would be so much more that they could do. So we, identify that as a limitation, a reverse salient, for example. And of course, that has a consequence of limiting the activities in the grander system. So that's just one example of many. What we did then was we synthesized all of that data to put together this slide, basically what you see in front of you, sort of a thematic categorization. And we see that sometimes we're missing the actors, sometimes we're missing the resources, maybe they're missing connections. For example, we found that there are so many small-scale farmers in Coffs Harbour, but we don't know much about what they do in terms of innovation and output. And that's kind of an opportunity that we need to capture in moving forward. Then, of course, there's leadership issues and, of course, the rules of engagement. And we try to capture those as well in this synthesis. And all of this then culminated in those 3 strategic pathways. In fact, I lied a little bit because we had 4 strategic pathways. The branding that you see on your right-hand side here, which we didn't explore further in our limited project. We feel that is a really important issue that experts in this marketing domain could tackle. But for the moment, we looked at the first 3 in terms of a precinct, a network, and skills and training focus for the future ecosystem in Coffs Harbour. We then went about and put together what we think these pathways could deliver. The precinct, as you see on your picture here, is a physical location. We believe the airport is perfect with this, by the way, where there are all kinds of facilities to help create collaboration, create entrepreneurial activities, provide resources that are currently missing in the ecosystem, such as facilities for storage and processing, and a distribution hub as well, this would be. So we captured that as the precinct. And we also looked at the kind of activities that the precinct would be engaged in. There's too much detail here to show you, but you can see that it lies at the center and it connects to various other actors in the ecosystem. And we even put together a business model canvas because we just love dealing with canvases. And, you know, this is only an idea, but we feel like this is the starting point of further discussion in refining what the precinct could actually do, how we could derive revenue, for example, what its cost structures could be, etc. We did a similar thing for the agri-food network. The agri-food network would, in my mind, maybe even be located at the precinct, but it would be more of the brain of the precinct. It's more of a business intelligence kind of activity that will be done here. This is about understanding the current trends, what the region is currently doing and what it should do to meet those trends, and all this kind of central brain work. And the agri-food network, we also captured here some of these activities that it could do, and also business model canvas in terms of how we could operate with whom and what would be its value proposition and so on. And the third pathway we looked at was about the skills and training. This emerged from our conversation that the human resources are really a vital and at times missing resource for the local innovators and entrepreneurs. And without that, it is difficult to move on to a new state where would there be more value added output and greater capacity. So we have a couple of ideas on how this could be tackled, but of course, this is, again, would start a conversation at this point. So here we have, for example, some kind of activities. There would be direct connection to the precinct and also the agri-food network in making sure that local education institutions would connect the industry and understand better what are the requirements and how collaboration could take place so that there could be a direct pathway, for example, from a local TAFE to the business. Another business model canvas we produced for the skills and training pathway, and I won't go into the details of that, of course. So those were the three strategic pathways. We then went about to look at study 2, a survey, and we started by asking, what has happened over the last 12 months? To our surprise, we found that sales profitability and productivity had gone up in the Coffs Harbour ecosystem, which was good, and manufacturers and restaurants, cafes were doing rather well. We also saw that employee training, so investment into HR and technology, didn't increase much. So there's potential here as we move forward into boosting these things, these attributes. And probably main finding here is about the barriers to innovation holding us back, and it's about the workers. We don't have enough skilled workers as well as unskilled workers, and we need to tackle those problems. But also, again, funding, as always, is an issue, and so regulatory barriers also demotivate at times innovation effort. So there are a couple of barriers to address as we move forward. But coming back to the main question driving this project, how we're going for value add and production capacity. The good news is when we asked people, they have lots of ideas on how to do innovation. In fact, they have innovation ideas already in place. They just don't maybe have the tools to move it forward. And this is my timer, my 15 minutes is up. So I'd like to conclude maybe on this slide to say that there's great potential in Coffs Harbour. We just need to find the engines to take innovative ideas into commercializable real-world products. And that applies for tackling sustainability and waste as well.